So here's a sobering statistic that might surprise you. According to recent industry research, nearly 60% of dental practices report that their technology investments haven't delivered the returns they expected. 60%. That's not just disappointing, it's financially devastating for many practices. But here's what's even more telling. It's not that technology doesn't work in dentistry. We've all seen practices that have transformed their efficiency, their patient experience, and profitability through smart technology adoption. The difference isn't the technology itself. It's the approach to selecting, implementing, and maximizing that technology. It's about seeing technology as a proper investment in how you work, not just jumping on the next flashy bit of kit. See, practices that adopt this philosophy understand that what works for one colleague might not work for you. They know there's a big difference between technology that just looks good and tech that actually helps you do a better job. But here's what I've learned working with hundreds of dental practices. Technology success isn't about having the most advanced equipment or the most expensive software. It's about making strategic decisions that align with your specific practice needs, implementing those solutions properly, and measuring actual returns on investment. So today we're going to walk through a complete framework for making technology decisions that actually deliver results. In fact, what I'm going to walk you through today is more than just a few tips. It's a 6-part roadmap made up of 21 clear steps, starting from how to assess your actual needs, to calculating real return on investment, and to future-proofing your entire technology strategy. We'll cover the 4 pillars of identifying what your practice really needs, a 5-part framework to evaluate technology properly, how to calculate and track ROI realistically, a 5-phase approach to implement without the chaos, and the most common pitfalls to avoid, and how to future-proof your strategy for the years ahead. So wherever you are on your technology journey, whether you're just starting to explore your options or you're trying to make sense of the tech you already have, this guide will give you a clear path forward. And as we move through this roadmap, you'll see that success isn't about collecting more gadgets. It's about choosing wisely, implementing properly, and making sure your technology actually supports your patients and your practice. But even with a full framework to follow, there is still one trap many practices fall into, and it's rarely talked about in the industry. Now, before we dive into the framework, let me challenge some conventional thinking about dental technology. The dental industry is constantly telling us about the next big thing: AI diagnostics, advanced imaging, patient communication platforms, practice management upgrades. And whilst many of these technologies are genuinely revolutionary, here's what no one talks about. More technology isn't always better technology. So I remember working with a practice owner. He was frustrated and financially stretched. Over 3 years, he'd invested nearly £150,000 in 5 technology solutions: digital scanner, new practice management system, patient communication platform, advanced imaging, and automated marketing tools. His practice had a very forward-thinking setup, nothing like your average clinic, but his numbers told a different story. Staff productivity had actually decreased. Patient satisfaction scores were quite flat. Revenue growth had stalled, and his team was overwhelmed, spending more time managing technology than caring for patients. And if you looked a bit closer, you'd notice something interesting. Most of the tech had been bought one bit at a time, usually after a convincing sales pitch or a quick word from a colleague. There wasn't much in the way of an overall plan. No real thought about how it would all fit together or whether any of it was actually making a difference. But the real shift didn't come from throwing in more equipment. It came from stepping back and thinking more strategically about what was already there. When everything works together properly, when the team knows how to use it, and when the systems are actually supporting the way you work, that's when the benefit starts to show. It's not about how much technology you've got. It's about whether it's doing anything useful. So the real question is this: is the investment in technology part of a clear plan, or is it just a collection of bits and pieces picked up along the way? because that difference between being deliberate and being reactive can have a huge impact on how well a practice performs, both clinically and financially. So the first part of the roadmap is about the technology needs assessment framework. Now let's start with the foundation of any smart technology decision, understanding what you actually need, not what vendors are selling, not what your colleague just bought, but what your specific practice genuinely requires to achieve its goals. So we need to divide this into the 4-pillar needs assessment. And pillar 1 is about operational analysis. Before even thinking about investing in new technology, it's essential to look at how your practice is currently operating. Because if you don't understand where the friction points lie, you risk throwing money at the wrong solution or solving a problem that doesn't actually exist. So ask yourself, where exactly are the bottlenecks in your patient flow? Are patients being kept waiting too long, or are clinicians running behind because of inefficient transitions? Which administrative tasks are soaking up valuable time? Tasks that feel repetitive, manual, or unnecessarily complex? Are there processes that frequently lead to stress, confusion, or mistakes in handling referrals, follow-up, or treatment planning? And perhaps most importantly, where are we losing potential revenue due to inefficiencies in scheduling, recall, or invoicing? Let me give you an example. I worked with a practice that was seriously considering investing in a costly new scheduling platform. The team felt overwhelmed by managing appointments and thought new software will solve the problem. But once we sat down and analyzed their actual workflow, it became clear the issue wasn't the software. It was the lack of structured training and clear protocols. They hadn't defined how much time should be allowed for different types of appointments, or who should be responsible for booking what. By resolving those internal systems first, they avoided an unnecessary expense and saw immediate improvements using the tools they already had. Now, pillar 2 is to look into clinical enhancement opportunities. Once your operational foundations are set, the next step is to consider how technology could meaningfully enhance clinical care, not just make things faster or fancier, but actually improve outcomes for patients. So reflect on the following. Are there diagnostic tools that could help you identify issues earlier or with greater accuracy, like digital scanning, AI-supported radiography, or intraoral imaging? Could certain technologies help you deliver treatment with more precision, predictability, and confidence, such as an operating microscope, guided endodontics, or digital workflow tools? Would specific innovations enhance patient experience, whether that's by reducing discomfort, shortening appointment times, or improving communication? And are there opportunities to streamline your clinical workflow, allowing you to focus more on treatment and less on prep, admin, and repetition? See, the aim here is not to adopt every new gadget that hits the market, but to identify which tools actually help you do what you already do, only better. And technology should support your clinical judgment, not replace it. Now, in pillar 3, there's the financial impact assessment. This is where many practices go off course, by focusing too narrowly on cost without considering the wider financial picture. Technology decisions should be viewed through the lens of impact, not just expenditure. So instead of asking, how much does it cost? Start with, where are we currently losing money due to inefficiencies, mistakes, or unnecessary labor? Could a specific tool unlock new income streams, for example, by enabling same-day services, digital smile design, Invisalign treatments, or more efficient consultations? And if you were to do things manually, what is the true cost in time, staff resources, or patient loss? And how does any proposed investment align with our broader financial goals, whether that's growth, sustainability, or freeing up clinical time? See, sometimes the most expensive option isn't the one with the highest price tag. It's the one that keeps you stuck in outdated processes. And finally, pillar 4. And it's about team capacity and culture. And maybe this is the most overlooked pillar of all. See, even the most promising technology will fail if your people are not equipped or willing to adopt it. So ask yourself honestly, does your team have the time and capacity to learn a new system? Will it simply feel like one more thing on an already overstretched to-do list? And what's the general confidence level with digital tools across your team? Are they curious, cautious, or maybe they're quietly resistant? How much change can your practice absorb at any one time? Especially if you're already managing recruitment, patient growth, or compliance updates. And crucially, do you have internal champions, that is, team members who could lead the way, support others, and help embed the technology into everyday practice? See, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If your team isn't on board, no matter how impressive the software or system, it just won't work. But when they're involved, supported, and empowered, the transformation is not only possible, it's lasting. Okay, before evaluating any specific technology, create what I call your practice technology profile. And this includes your top 3 operational challenges, your primary clinical goals for the next 12 months, your available budget for technology investments, your team's change management capacity, and your current technology ecosystem and integration requirements. This profile becomes your filter for evaluating every technology opportunity. If a solution doesn't address your identified challenges or align with your goals, it doesn't matter how impressive the demo is, it's not the right upgrade for your practice. Now, if you'd like a comprehensive technology needs assessment worksheet that walks you through this entire process, including detailed questionnaires for each pillar and a practice profile template, just comment needs assessment below and I will send you the complete toolkit. It's designed to help you identify your real technology needs before you start looking at solutions. All right, let's move on to part 2 of the roadmap, which includes the strategic evaluation framework. Once you understand your actual needs, the next step is evaluating potential solutions objectively. And this is where most practices make costly mistakes. They get caught up in flashy demonstrations or persuasive sales presentations instead of conducting systematic evaluations. So here, let me introduce the SMART technology evaluation system. The first element is strategic alignment, and this is your deep dive. For every bit of technology you're considering, you need to ask these specific questions. How exactly does this solve our real problems? What specific clinical outcomes will actually improve in our practice? How does this integrate with what we already have? And does this move us forward to where we want to be, or is it just shiny and new? So I remember a practice that got really excited about AI diagnostic software. The technology looked amazing, the demo was impressive, but when they asked these strategic questions, they realized their real problems were with patient communication and treatment acceptance, not diagnosis. So the AI wouldn't fix what was actually broken. Now, the second element is measurable impact, and this is where you get realistic. This is where you separate the marketing fluff from what will actually happen in your practice. Vendors love throwing around impressive statistics, but you need to pin them down on specifics. So start by asking what numbers will genuinely improve. Don't accept vague promises like increased efficiency or better patient outcomes. You need to get specific. Will this reduce appointment times by 10 minutes? Will it increase case acceptance by 15%? Will it cut your admin time by 2 hours a day? Then you need to know how you'll measure success. If they're promising better patient communication, how exactly will you track that? With patient satisfaction scores, fewer complaints, more referrals, you need concrete ways to measure whether this technology is actually delivering. And what are you comparing it against? This is crucial. If your current patient management system handles 90% of appointments without issues and the new one promises 95% efficiency, is that 5% improvement worth the cost and disruption? You need your baseline numbers before you can measure any improvement. And when should you expect to see real results? This is where vendors often get a bit shifty. They might say immediate benefits, but what they really mean is after 6 months of implementation, 3 months of staff training, and 2 months of working out the bugs. Get realistic timelines, not just marketing promises. I worked with a practice that bought expensive scheduling software because the vendor promised 30% fewer missed appointments. 6 months later, their no-show rate had barely changed because their real problem wasn't the booking system. It was that they weren't confirming appointments properly. The software couldn't fix a process problem. Now, the third element is affordability, but we're talking total cost here. Now, this is where most practices get caught out. You see a price of £5,000 and think that's what it costs, but that's just the beginning. So what is this piece of tech really going to cost you over 2 or 3 years? Start with the obvious: the software license, any hardware you need, and installation costs. Then add the less obvious bits, like staff time for training, lost productivity during implementation, ongoing support fees, and upgrade costs. One practice told me they bought a digital imaging system for £15,000. Seemed reasonable. But then came the training costs, the computer upgrades, the network improvements, the annual software license, the support contracts. 2 years later, they'd spent nearly £30,000. Not that it wasn't worth it, but they hadn't budgeted for the real cost. Then ask yourself, can you actually afford this without stretching yourself too thin? And this is about cash flow, not just total cost. A £20,000 system paid over 4 years might be manageable, but £20,000 up front might leave you short for other essential spending. Don't let technology purchases put pressure on your working capital. And when will you break even, realistically? If the vendor claims you'll save £500 per month and the total cost is £12,000, they'll say you'll break even in 24 months. But that assumes you get the full benefit immediately, which rarely happens, and then factor in implementation time, learning curves, and initial productivity dips. And here's something most people don't consider. What happens if you don't do this? What's the cost of staying with your current system? Sometimes the cost of not upgrading in lost efficiency, frustrated staff, or patients going elsewhere is higher than the technology investment. Now, the fourth element is references and vendor evaluation. Here's the thing, you're not just buying software. You're entering a relationship that might last years. Some vendors are amazing partners. Others disappear the moment you've signed the contract. Talk to other practices who've actually used this technology, not the testimonials on their website. Real practices you can speak to confidently. Ask them, what problems did you encounter during setup? How long did implementation really take? What would you do differently? And most importantly, how good is the vendor when things go wrong? I always suggest asking for references from practices that implemented 12 to 18 months ago. The honeymoon period is over, they've dealt with real-world problems, and they can give you an honest assessment of ongoing support quality. How good is their support when things go wrong? Because things will go wrong. Servers crash, software bugs appear, staff accidentally delete important data. And when that happens at 4 p.m. on a Friday, can you reach someone who can actually help? Or are you stuck with an automated system telling you to submit a ticket? Will they actually help you implement this properly? Some vendors sell you this software and wave goodbye. Others assign implementation specialists, provide proper training, and check in regularly during your first few months. The difference in success rates is enormous. And finally, you want to check the contract terms carefully. What happens when you want to upgrade? Are you locked into expensive annual increases? Can you export your data if you decide to switch? Some contracts make it nearly impossible to leave, which puts you in a very weak position for future negotiations. All right, now the final element of SMART is timing, because getting this right matters. Just because technology is amazing doesn't mean now is the right time for your practice to implement it. Is your team ready for another change? If you've just moved premises, hired new staff, or implemented other new systems, adding more change might be overwhelming. And change fatigue is real, and it can turn good technology into a disaster if your team can't cope with learning something new. And you need to ask yourself, do you have the bandwidth to implement this properly? Most technology implementations require significant time investment from your team. Someone needs to oversee the setup, train the staff, troubleshoot problems, and ensure the system is working properly. If everyone's already stretched thin, this might not be the right moment. And also, what else is happening in your practice right now? Are you planning to expand, hire new associates, or renovate? Multiple major changes happening simultaneously often mean none of them get the attention they deserve. And another question you might want to ask yourself is, how long will this actually take to roll out? Vendors often underestimate implementation time. They might say up and running in 2 weeks, but that could mean technically installed in 2 weeks, but not less than 3 to 6 months before your team is using it effectively. So plan for the realistic timeline, not the optimistic one. And what's your backup plan if it doesn't go smoothly? Technology implementations really can go wrong in so many different ways. Your old system might crash before the new one is ready. Staff might struggle with the learning curve. Having contingency plans reduces stress and increases your chances of success. So I remember a practice that chose to implement new practice management software right before Christmas. Predictably, there were setup problems. Staff were stressed about learning new systems during their busiest period, and the whole experience was unnecessarily difficult. The same technology implemented in January would have been much more successful. The key is being honest about your practice's capacity for change and choosing timing that sets you up for success, not stress. Now, if this evaluation process seems thorough, perhaps even overwhelming, that's intentional. Because here's what I've learned from working with practices that have succeeded with technology versus those that have struggled. The successful ones invest more time in the decision-making process and less time fixing problems afterwards. So imagine a practice owner who spends 6 months evaluating practice management systems. Her colleagues might think she's being overly cautious. Just pick one and get started, right? But her methodical approach pays off dramatically. When she finally makes her decision, the implementation goes smoothly because she's chosen a system that aligned perfectly with her practice workflow. Her team are prepared because she involved them in the evaluation process, and within 6 months, she achieves a significant improvement in admin efficiency and in case acceptance because of better patient communication tools. Meanwhile, a colleague who had made a quick decision based on a single demo was struggling with system integration issues, staff resistance, and functionality gaps that were costing him both time and money. So what's the lesson here? Time invested in proper evaluation isn't time wasted. It's time that prevents costly mistakes and ensures successful outcomes. So you're a dentist who's passionate about what you do, but honestly, you're feeling a bit stuck. Working harder, but your income feels stagnant. Dreaming of more freedom, more fulfillment, maybe even that 15K or 20K monthly income you know is possible. Now here's the thing, you've probably tried the usual advice, right? Just see more patients, work longer hours, cut costs. But that just leads to burnout, not breakthrough. See, what most dentists don't realize is that true success, both financial freedom and fulfillment, requires a completely different approach. So that's exactly what I've created. The Essential Dentist Guide, a completely free 5-step course that will show you the real pathway to becoming fulfilled and financially free. We're talking about understanding your numbers properly, strategic action, smart goal setting, effective communication, and building your personalized roadmap. Now, this isn't just theory. This is the exact foundation that leads to the over 30K monthly income many of my dentists are now achieving. 5 focused lessons, completely free, delivered straight to your inbox. No fluff, just proven strategies that actually work in the real world. Alright, so if you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start building the practice you actually love, check out the link in the description below to get your free access. Your future, fulfilled and financially free self will thank you. Okay, on to part 3 of the roadmap, and this covers the ROI calculation methodology. Now we come to perhaps the most critical aspect of technology decision-making, calculating real return on investment. Not the optimistic projections the sales reps provide. They're often about as reliable as weather forecasts, but realistic, measurable ROI based on your specific practice circumstances. So first, we'll look at the true cost of technology ownership. Most practices dramatically underestimate the total cost of technology, and this is where many implementation failures start. They budget for the sticker price and get blindsided by everything else. So here's what you absolutely must include in your calculations. So first, your direct costs. This is the obvious stuff, but even here, there are surprises. You've got your purchase price or subscription fees. That's straightforward. Then installation and setup costs, which sales reps tend to mention in passing, but somehow never seem to highlight when they're showing you all the impressive features. And hardware requirements can be a bit deceptive too. The new software might need new computers with more memory, higher processing power, or additional monitors that you hadn't budgeted for. And integration expenses are another area where costs can spiral. Getting your new system to actually talk properly to your existing systems often ends up costing far more than anyone initially expects. And then you've got your indirect costs. And this is where most practices really get caught out. Staff training time needs to be calculated at their actual hourly rate. If it takes your practice manager 20 hours to learn the system and you pay them £25 an hour, that's £500 of real cost, even if the sales rep calls the training free. On top of that, productivity loss during implementation is huge and is often ignored. While your team is learning the new system, they'll work more slowly, make more mistakes, and probably get a bit frustrated as well. All of that translates to fewer patients seen or longer appointments, which costs you money. Then there's ongoing support and maintenance costs, and both add up over time as well. That £200 monthly support fee might seem small, but over 5 years is £12,000. Upgrade and update costs can be substantial too, especially if you're locked into the seller's upgrade cycle. And here's one most people miss: opportunity cost of capital investment. The £25,000 you spend on equipment is £25,000 you can't invest elsewhere in your practice. Now, if you could have used that money for marketing that generates 20% returns, you need to factor that into your calculation. So let's look at a concrete example from a practice I worked with. They were considering a £25,000 digital scanner. The direct cost seemed straightforward, but let's look at what they actually spent. So we know the scanner itself costs £25,000. The installation and training costs an additional £2,000. Staff training time at 40 hours at £25 an hour equals £1,000. Integration with their existing systems cost them £1,500. First-year maintenance contract cost them £2,500. Productivity loss during the learning curve costs £3,000. And as a result, their true first-year investment was £35,000, not $25,000. Now that's 40% higher than they had budgeted for. So if you do this calculation beforehand, you'll be well prepared. Okay, now on to the revenue impact framework. For calculating potential revenue benefits, I break this down into 3 clear categories. First, your efficiency gains. How much time will this actually save per procedure or appointment? Now you need to be specific here. If the sales rep says significant time savings, you need to pin them down. 5 minutes per patient, 10 minutes. So over a day with 20 patients, 10 minutes each is over 3 hours of additional capacity. Will this increase your appointment capacity? Sometimes technology lets you see more patients in the same time. Sometimes it lets you offer more services. Calculate what additional revenue this represents. Now you need to look at reduced administrative overhead too. So if your new practice management software cuts admin time by 2 hours daily, that's either cost savings or capacity for revenue generating activities. And there's also the benefit of fewer mistakes and less rework. If your current system creates booking confusion, treatment mix-ups, or patient data problems, better technology can eliminate these expensive headaches. Now, the second category is revenue enhancement opportunities. What new services does this technology actually enable? A digital scanner might let you offer same-day crowns, implant planning, or cosmetic consultations you couldn't do before. If you present your cases on the digital scanner, this may lead to improved case acceptance, and that's often underestimated. When patients can see 3D images of their treatment plan, acceptance rates tend to increase dramatically, especially for those new patients who you're trying to build a trust relationship with. Now, better patient experience through technology often increases retention. Patients who feel your practice is modern and efficient are more likely to stay and refer others. Some technology enables premium pricing. If you can offer services faster, more accurately, or more comfortably, patients will often pay more for the improved experience. And the third category is cost avoidance. This is money you don't have to spend anymore. Reduced lab fees if you can do work in-house, decreased supply costs through better inventory management, lower expenses related to remakes when technology prevents mistakes. And then avoided opportunity costs matter too. If better scheduling software prevents empty appointment slots, you're avoiding lost revenue. Okay, time now for the conservative ROI model. Always use conservative estimates in your ROI calculations. Sales reps are naturally optimistic, but you need to plan for reality. Here's my recommended approach. Calculate 3 scenarios: pessimistic, realistic, and optimistic. In the pessimistic scenario, assume technology saves 30% less time than promised and takes 50% longer to implement. The realistic scenario uses your best guess based on talking to other practices. The optimistic scenario is what the sales rep promises. Use the realistic scenario for decision making, but make sure you'd still be comfortable with the pessimistic outcome. If the technology only makes sense in the optimistic scenario, it's probably too risky. Then also include a risk factor for implementation challenges. Things rarely go perfectly smoothly. So build in a buffer for unexpected costs or delays. All right, let's discuss payback period analysis. So different technologies have different reasonable payback periods, and understanding this helps set realistic expectations. So practice management software should pay for itself in 12 to 18 months. It touches every part of your practice, so benefits should appear quickly. Clinical equipment like scanners or lasers usually need 2 to 3 years. They're expensive, but can fundamentally change your service offering. Diagnostic technology falls somewhere in between at 18 to 24 months. It improves accuracy and patient experience, but doesn't necessarily increase volume dramatically. And marketing technology should show returns in 6 to 12 months. If your website redesign or social media tools aren't generating leads within a year, something is wrong. Okay, so now let's talk about the monthly ROI tracking system. Right, once you've implemented your shiny new technology, here's something absolutely crucial. You've got to track whether it's actually working monthly, not when you remember, not when things feel a bit off. Every single month. And here's the thing that drives me mad. I see practices spending £20,000, £30,000, or even £50,000 on equipment. And then they never bother checking if it's doing what they paid for. It's like buying a car and never looking at the fuel gauge. So before you implement anything, write down your starting numbers. How long does a crown prep actually take you right now? And what percentage of patients say yes to treatment? How many patients are you seeing each day? These aren't glamorous numbers, but you absolutely need them. Then track the stuff that actually matters for what you bought. If you bought a scheduling software to stop people not turning up, count the failed to attends every month. Invested in a digital scanner to get more people saying yes to crowns, count how many crowns you're actually doing. Now here's where it gets interesting. Compare what's actually happening to what you thought would happen. If you reckoned you'd save 10 minutes per day, but you're only saving 5, something needs to change. Either your processes need tweaking, or your expectations were a bit optimistic. Sometimes the technology is fine, but your team just isn't using it properly. That's not the equipment's fault. That's a training issue. So what should you be tracking? Well, first, time savings per patient. And I mean actually timing this, not guessing. Then revenue per appointment. Has it gone up? And also case acceptance for the treatments this technology is supposed to help with. You can track patient satisfaction. Are they happier? Staff productivity. Are they getting through more work? And mistakes. Are there fewer of them? So let me tell you about a practice that learned this lesson the hard way. They bought really expensive 3D imaging kit. Looked absolutely brilliant in the demo. And 18 months later, they finally decided to check if it was working. Turns out they were using it for every single consultation, showing patients those amazing 3D images. But only 2% more people were saying yes to treatment than before. The technology was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The problem was their consultation skills needed work, not their imaging. If they'd been tracking this monthly, they'd have spotted the real issue within a few months, not a year and a half later. So technology is an investment, just like buying shares or property. And just like any investment, you need to know if it's making you money or costing you money. The only way to know that is to measure it properly. Now, if you want a complete ROI calculator specifically designed for dental technology investments, including templates for different technology types, monthly tracking spreadsheets, and payback period analysis tools, just comment ROI calculator below and I will send you the entire financial analysis toolkit. It will help you make data-driven technology decisions and track actual returns. So part 4 of the roadmap is about the implementation success strategy. Right, here's where things can go completely sideways, even when you've made brilliant technology choices. I've watched practices pick absolutely perfect solutions and then completely mess up the rollout because they just made it up as they went along. See, buying the technology is actually the easy bit. Getting it to work properly in your practice, well, that's where the real work starts. It's not just about plugging things in and hoping for the best. You need proper change management, training that actually sticks, workflow that makes sense, and you need to keep an eye on how it's all going. So let me introduce you to the phase implementation model. Think of this as your roadmap for actually getting that expensive bit of kit working properly in your practice. So phase 1 is all about preparation and planning. Before you switch anything on, get all your basics organized first. You've got to be crystal clear about what success looks like and when you expect to see it. Who on your team is going to champion this change? Because trust me, you need someone who's excited about it, not just doing it because they have to. Then work out exactly when everything is going to happen. And I mean everything. When's the training? When do you go live? What happens if it all goes wrong? And speaking of things going wrong, you need backup plans. What if the new system crashes on day 1? What if your team hates it? What if patients complain? And don't forget to tell your patients something's changing. You don't need to bore them with technical details, but a heads up that appointments might run slightly differently for a few weeks is just common courtesy. And then there's the critical stuff you absolutely must sort out. Back up everything. And I mean everything. If your current system dies while you're setting up the new one, you want your data safe. Then block out sufficient time for training. Not, we'll figure it out as we go. Actual scheduled time when you're not trying to see patients. Let patients know if anything might affect them. Get all the vendors' contact details somewhere everyone can find them. And finally, work out exactly what you'll do if you need to go back to your old system quickly. Okay, so phase 2 is the hands-on training and setup. Now here's something that'll save you a world of pain. Don't just rely on the vendor's training. It's usually rushed and generic, and it doesn't fit how your practice actually works. Instead, book proper training time when the practice is closed. Then get everyone involved who will be using this thing. Create your own instruction guides that make sense for your specific workflows. And here's a golden rule. Practice on real cases, but not the critical ones. Don't learn the new system on your most anxious patient or your most complex treatment plan. And finally, pick a few team members to become your go-to people, the ones who really get the system and can help everyone else when things get confusing. So let me tell you about a practice that recently implemented a new practice management software on their own. Instead of accepting the vendor's standard half-day training session, they scheduled 3 separate training sessions over 2 weeks, focusing on different aspects of their workflow. They also created customized, quick reference guides specific to their procedures. And the result was quite amazing. Smooth implementation with minimal disruption. Okay, so phase 3 is adoption and workflow integration. This is make or break time. Either the technology becomes part of how you work, or it becomes that expensive thing everyone grumbles about. So start small and simple. Don't try to use every fancy feature on day one. Get the basics working smoothly first. Then keep an eye on who's using it and who's finding excuses not to. Address problems straight away before they become habits, good or bad ones. And celebrate the wins, even small ones. When someone masters a new feature or saves time on a procedure, announce it to the team. Now here's something really important. The parallel system strategy. For anything critical, run your old and new systems side by side for a while. I know it seems like extra work, but it's insurance. If the new system hiccups, you can still function. Plus, you can compare how they both work and build confidence in the new approach gradually. Okay, on to phase 4, which is about support and optimization. Just because the system's running doesn't mean you're done. Technology implementation is like a garden. It needs ongoing attention. Check in with your team regularly about how things are going. Keep talking to your vendor. They might have updates or tips you haven't heard about. And keep tracking those metrics we talked about earlier. Stay on top of software updates. They often fix annoying little issues. And never assume the training stops once you go live. As your team gets more comfortable, they'll want to learn more advanced features. Now, the last phase is evaluation and enhancement. Every 6 months, sit down and properly review how it's all going. Is it delivering the ROI you expected? Are there features you're not using that could help? Could it work better with your other systems? Is your team happy with it? What do you need to plan for next? This isn't just about checking boxes. It's about making sure your investment keeps paying off and keeps getting better over time. All right, let's move on to part 5 of the roadmap, which covers common technology pitfalls and how to avoid them. Now, let me share some of the most common and costly mistakes I see practices make with technology, and more importantly, how to avoid them. So pitfall number 1 is the shiny object syndrome. And this is when practices chase the latest technology trends without considering strategic fit. I've seen practices invest in AI diagnostic tools when their real need was better patient communication, or expensive imaging equipment when their scheduling inefficiencies were costing them more revenue. So how to avoid it? Well, always refer back to your needs assessment before considering new technology. So you need to ask yourself, does this address our identified priorities, or are we being distracted by impressive capabilities we don't actually need? The second pitfall is integration ignorance. See, buying technology that won't talk to your existing systems is asking for trouble. You end up with information scattered all over the place, your team doing everything twice, and so many inefficiencies that any benefits just disappear. So how to avoid it? Well, integration needs to be non-negotiable. Take a proper look at all the systems you've got running and make sure any new technology will actually connect properly with everything else. Now, pitfall number 3 is inadequate training investment. Practices throw serious money at technology, but then barely invest in teaching people how to use it properly. What happens is that you've got expensive systems that nobody really knows how to use, and they're using them all wrong. And instead of making life easier, it just winds everyone up. So how to avoid it? You need to set aside 15 to 20% of whatever you're spending on technology for proper training. Not just the initial session, but follow-up training and ongoing support as your team gets more confident and your needs change. Now, pitfall number 4 is unrealistic timeline expectations. So here's the thing. Technology doesn't deliver instant magic. Practices often get fed up and abandon perfectly good systems because they expected results immediately. So here's how to avoid this. You need to set realistic timelines from the start. Expect 3 to 6 months before you see meaningful improvements, and 12 to 18 months before you're getting the full value from your investment. Okay, finally, let's discuss pitfall number 5. Vendor dependency. Relying too heavily on one vendor leaves you at their mercy. If they raise their prices, change their services, or go bust, you're completely stuck. So how to avoid this? Well, don't put everything with one supplier. Keep some variety in your technology setup and always have a plan for getting out if you need to switch systems. Okay, let me now give you the technology success checklist. So before you pull the trigger on any new technology, run through these questions. If you can't honestly say yes to all of them, that means you're not ready yet. So do you actually know what specific problems this is going to solve? Not vague stuff like make things better. You want to identify real concrete problems. Have you worked out the true cost of everything and figured out if it will actually pay for itself? You need to abandon wishful thinking here. And do you genuinely have the time and resources to do this properly? Or are you kidding yourself that you'll somehow find the time later? Are you absolutely certain this will work with what you've already got? Because if it doesn't, you're creating more problems than you're solving. And have you got the vendor's promises in writing? Not just verbal assurances, proper commitments they can't move away from. Is your team actually ready for this change? Have you talked to them, trained them, got them on board? Do you know how you'll measure whether this is working? You need concrete ways to track success, not just gut feelings. And what's your plan B if it all goes wrong? Because things do go wrong, and you need to know how you'll cope. So now if you're hesitating on any of these, well, that's your answer. You're not ready yet. And that's fine. Better to wait and do it right than rush and regret it. All right, let's get to the final part of the roadmap. And it's about future-proofing your technology strategy. And as we wrap this up, let's talk about building a technology strategy that won't leave you stuck in 5 years' time. And here, we need to talk about the technology evolution mindset. Technology in dentistry is moving at a crazy pace. AI diagnostics, teledentistry, advanced materials, digital workflows. It feels like every month there's something new and revolutionary. But here's the thing. Instead of trying to predict what's coming next, because nobody really knows, focus on building systems that can adapt and keeping your options open. So what are the key future-proofing principles? Well, first, invest in platforms, not just one-off solutions. Pick technology partners who are constantly improving and developing their offerings. You want systems that grow and evolve, not ones that do the same thing forever and get left behind. Second, stick to integration standards. Choose technologies that play by the industry rules for sharing data and connecting to other systems. This way, you won't get trapped with obsolete kit that can't talk to anything else. And third, build your team's tech skills generally. Don't just train them on specific systems. Help them get comfortable with technology in general. When the next change comes along, they'll adapt much faster. So a good way to do this is to hold an annual technology review. Once a year, sit down and properly review everything you've got. How's it all performing against what you hoped? What new needs are propping up in your practice? What kit might need upgrading or replacing soon? What should you budget for technology next year? And what's happening in the industry that you should know about? Here's the thing to remember. Technology should work for your practice vision, not the other way around. The most successful practices use technology strategically to give better patient care, work more efficiently, and stay ahead of the competition. It's not about having the flashiest gadgets or the newest everything. It's about having the right technology set up properly, delivering real results that help you achieve what you're trying to do. Now, before you make your next technology decision, I want to give you one final resource. I've put together a comprehensive technology implementation masterclass, step-by-step checklists, team training templates, ROI tracking spreadsheets, vendor evaluation forms, everything you need to make sure your technology investments actually deliver what you're paying for. Just comment implementation guide below and I will send you the complete package. Your practice deserves technology that makes your life easier, not more complicated. The framework we've covered today will help you make smart decisions that actually deliver results. The question isn't whether you need better technology, it's whether you're ready to be strategic about it. Your patience, your team, and your practice success all depend on getting this right. So what's the time to start thinking strategically about technology? Well, it's right now. Thank you for watching.